Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
In 1999, Robert Greene published a book called The 48 Laws of Power. The book was a sensation. It sold over 1 million copies and has been translated into over 25 languages. At its root, the book is practical. This practical book gives 48 lessons from history on how to grab and keep power. It's a helpful example for Christians about both what not to do and what to understand about the way people's minds work today. Hey everybody, and so glad to be back with you here. We're going to be taking a look today in this particular class at Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. Over the next few weeks, I want to take with you a look at individual laws. Not all of them, because 48 is just too many, but we're going to take a look at many of them. And the reason we're doing this is I call this series the Anti-Leader series, okay? So every once in a while, we've done this before with Saul Alinsky, we did this before with Machiavelli, and now we're doing it here with Robert Greene. It's helpful to look at people who represent what we don't want to be. Okay. And it was important because it's not just always so clear cut. Not everything about Greene and what he's writing, for example, is bad. There's a lot of intelligence and there's a lot of nuance in what he's saying that can be also very helpful in some cases, but which is always helpful for us to acknowledge, because at its root, whenever something an idea is wrong, it's rarely because it presents something that's not true. I mean, if it was just completely false, you wouldn't believe it, right? The thing is it presents a truth in a way that's twisted, meaning that most of it's true and most of it we want to believe. And yet, if you take any element of truth and you exaggerate it, or maybe you reorder it towards some other meaning, and then suddenly the statement is false, even though it looks appealing to our minds. Nobody is a fool. No Christians are going to say, I'm going to lead in a bad way on purpose. We don't do mistakes on purpose. That's the whole thing about a mistake, is that we weren't intending to do it, but it's still wrong and it's still hurtful, right? And so by looking at what I refer to here in Greene as anti-leadership, it's easier for us to see the beauty and the value of true leadership and then avoid some of the side steps that Greene makes, right? So it's not saying that Greene is all wrong and that we can't use what he's saying or that there's not much that he says that's correct. It's just that there's a way that Greene approaches power that is distorted. We talked about this in the last class, and it's because he lets power be for its own sake. Remember Aristotle. Aristotle said, if a person quests after power, it's for the sake of something else, right? You have power so that you can then serve the good of other people. And of course, serve the way that Christ wants us to serve as leaders. That you have now a platform by which you can make your influence more known, more widely disseminated than you could without it. That's the beautiful thing about power. You can actually do things. You've been given your agency, right? You can make an impact in the world. And it's something that all of us want to do necessarily. So then what Greene's going to do is he's going to say, well, then use these 48 laws. And many of them, in fact, you can use. It's not like the book is nothing but error. No, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of truth in it. But the perspective that Greene presents is not the Christian perspective, because he doesn't say that power is a tool and that therefore perhaps, in fact, God doesn't want us to have as much power as we might want, or that in circumstances we're actually more powerful if we operate according to the law of the cross than according to Greene's 48 laws of power. So really, by highlighting these laws, What I'm trying to say is, well, number one, it's interesting to know what a good thinker thinks today, right? And what thoughts out there in the minds of other people. But then number two, it just helps see the glory of the full beauty of the truth about leadership that Christ puts forward for us. Because of course he's talking about leadership. What does Christ say about power? Now that'd be an interesting study, right? What if we opened our Bibles and we looked at what Christ says about wielding power? Authority, leadership. He says a lot. After all, he's training his disciples to be leaders. And he's going to send them forward as men, yes, who have power at the same time. Maybe not the power of the world. That's the whole thing. What is Christian power? How do Christians wield power? How did Christ himself wield power or wield powerlessness on the cross in the most powerful of ways? And this is what I want to take a look at, right? So we're going to look at this by looking at various laws. Let's look today at Law 10. So Green calls the law infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. And here's what he says. You can die from someone else's misery. Emotional states are as infectious as diseases. You may feel you are helping the drowning man, but you're only precipitating your own disaster. The unfortunate sometimes draw misfortune on themselves. They will also draw it on you. Associate with the happy and fortunate instead. Okay, so that's Green's little summary of his law, right? Basically, avoid those who are unhappy or who are unfortunate. Because as he says, you can die from someone else's misery, right? You may feel you are helping the drowning man, but you're only precipitating your own disaster. Well, now, on the one hand, right, there's some truth in this. We can understand this. I remember hearing the story of a coach that I know who was saying that sometimes when his clients start to express too much emotional negativity, he actually turns them off. And so the person is saying, hey, I'm here to have coaching, but he insists that they not go too far in expressing all of their woes and misery because he says it doesn't help. In fact, that kind of negative thinking is infectious. And if you're not careful, just absorbing the negativity of other people can change the mindset of the coaching from one of success orientation into, almost doomed failure. So he has a policy where he'll actually hang up on people, or not hang up necessarily, but just break off the coaching session if it gets too negative. That's interesting. Maybe he's read Robert Greene's laws. I mean, this is obvious for anybody. There comes a time where you realize that if you're trying to climb a mountain and you have danger on all sides, there comes a point where having someone constantly say that they're going to fall or that it's most likely that you're not going to make it to the top isn't helpful. It's actually downright discouraging. We need to surround our people with positive people if we're doing an endeavor that seeks to do something great. Right? So what Green's saying makes sense. I remember the story of St. John of the Cross. He's a Catholic priest who had a great endeavor in his mind to reform an order, right? To take a community of Catholic friars who were living in a certain way that wasn't very good. And he was going to try to change their behaviors rather, profoundly, so that they could do things and live in a better way that's good. So, of course, he's got to convince the men who are living in rather, in degrees of comfort and, in security to take on these more austere measures as a way of life, and they didn't want to do it. And so the friar who was in charge of the community took the St. John of the Cross and he put him into a prison for 30 days on bread and water to try to break his spirit so that he would stop the efforts to reform the order. And part of what he did was the prior had, every day he assigned another monk to go down to the cellar door and on a regular basis to say through the grill to St. John of the Cross, who was inside the prison cell, "You are going to fail." And then again, "You are going to fail." And then again, "You are going to fail." Just like to repeat to him over and over again as a type of mental method to convince him to stop what he was doing by discouraging him. Right? And we can all understand this could happen to us as well. Who are the people who surround you? Are you surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you to succeed? Obviously, this is important, right? So we're not saying this isn't. Even our Lord says, do not throw your pearls before swine, right? I mean, literally, don't throw your pearls before swine. Don't expose your heart to people who aren't going to appreciate or understand it, right? So there's an aspect of this that's right, but there's also an insistence here that we need to be careful of. And I'm going to go more deeply into that with you.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So in Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, he has a 10th law, right, where he basically says to avoid those who are unlucky or misfortunate or who are, struggling emotionally, because that kind of negativity is infectious. As he says that there's an inward instability in the unfortunate that radiates outward, drawing disaster upon itself. There's almost a desire, he writes, to destroy and unsettle. You could spend a lifetime studying the pathology of infecting characters, but don't waste your time. Just learn the lesson. And that lesson is that those misfortunates among us who have been brought down by circumstances beyond their control deserve all the help and sympathy we can give them. But there are others who are not born to misfortune or unhappiness, but who draw it upon themselves by their destructive actions and unsettling effect on others. It would be a great thing if we could raise them up, change their patterns. But more often than not, it is their patterns that end up getting inside and changing us. Well, okay, obviously, there's a lot, that's positive about what he's saying here. You could try to think like, would you want to work in the court of Herod, for example? Herod was a disaster of a person at the time of Jesus. It's just a disaster. He had married his brother's wife, in an act of adultery. He lived a life of profligacy. He was a mess. I wouldn't recommend anyone befriending Herod at that level, right? Or hanging around him. It'd be a really negative influence on you. It's just that, on the other hand, we see our Lord surrounding himself with the sick, with lepers, right? Lepers were the social outcasts of the time because what it meant is any kind of skin disease was leprosy. It wasn't just the modern day leprosy that we imagine. It was any kind of disease of the skin. And of course, that's something that we find in every culture, every time. But for the Jewish people, they had laws around it that would cause those people to be shunned, to be exiled until their skin could be purified again. And so often the lepers would live as social outcasts amongst themselves, outside of the city gates, and they had to resort therefore for begging and alms for economic survival. Any Jew who would touch them at the time of Christ would therefore become ritually impure and unable to offer their own sacrifice to God in the temple, right? So it was really something else, this law of leprosy. And how amazing that in the Gospels, when the lepers come towards Christ, he literally touches them, right? So it's not even that he says, be healed, and then he runs away lest he gets sick. But he touches the leper. Right? Or when you look at demoniacs, of course, this would be a really negative person to be around, right? Because demoniacs, they got the demon in them. This is going to exile you from God. And Jesus addresses the demons and casts them out. He goes towards the sick, even though he himself could therefore get sick. And he throws himself into the company of the unfortunates of this world. And so like right away, when you look at that, you say, my gosh, is that what we're called to do? And the answer is, to a degree, yes. In a way, yes. Because, and not what Robert Greene says, which is simply shun these people. Keep away from them. They're going to keep you down. And on the contrary, Christ says, whoever would be first among you must become last of all and the servant of all, right? And then when he's at the Last Supper, he takes off his outer garment, lays it down on the ground, and then kneels at the feet of his own apostles, looking at their dirty feet, right? And washes their feet one by one out of love for them. Right? So the washing of the feet there, of course, he's done throughout his life, because here Jesus doesn't surround himself, in other words, with men who are going to be smarter than him. These are men he's had to teach, and many times didn't even understand his teaching. He didn't surround himself, in other words, or give us the example of saying that you should only befriend people of power. I mean, he does say, make friends with mammon, right? Or make friends with the people who have money in this world so that they can help you, right? So he doesn't say not to. And he himself had powerful friends, not all of them, and not even most of them. But he didn't say that this is wrong to do. We see St. Paul, for example, befriending and being with the successful as he was also with the lowly. It's like St. Peter says that God does not have a regard for personages, right? But rather persons. And some of them will be helpful because of their power, but we don't love them because of their power. And this is just the thing. When you look at Green's 10th law, he basically is saying that the quest that you have to rise in life and to be successful is the number one thing. And this is what makes it skewed. This is why it's an anti-leadership book. Because, yes, I mean, there's something commonsensical about what he says here, that, you shouldn't allow the negativity of others to spread to yourself. But what he then says is, therefore, have nothing to do with those who have, emotional troubles, or with those who have not succeeded in parts of their life. That's not the way. That's not a Christian way. On the contrary, Christ tells us to help the people who are in need. He says directly, cure the sick, cleanse lepers, raise the dead. And the whole tradition of our church is one who over 2,000 years has gone towards those who are in need in order to bring them the saving message of Jesus Christ by truth, yes, but also in physical help. And our leaders, our saints, have shown just the opposite propensity. It's more like, but Jesus says, whatever you do to the least of my brethren, that you do unto me. So what am I to do, therefore, as a leader? Because on the one hand, I want to become more, impactful. I want to be able to be more influential in wherever I am so that I can spread God's blessings even further. There are 2 points where we see that Green has overlooked and also distorted the approach that a Christian person would have. And the first is to say that rise for power is the first goal. No, that's the whole trick right there. Be very careful with that. Rising to power is not your first goal. It is the means that you can choose to try to take in order to achieve your first goal, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Right? I mean, if you get to the top of society and you have all kinds of money and power, but you're a bad person, I'm not going to be rooting for you, okay? I'm not going to be proud of you. I'm not going to say, I'm so glad that you're my leader. On the contrary, I'm going to say, oh, brother, here we go again, right? Because, again, the places of power are filled with men who seek it as if it's only goal, including, those who follow this kind of thing. I'm going to step on those who are along my way. I'm going to, avoid those who are leprous or those who are, misfortunate. That's not the whole point. And on the contrary, wouldn't it be wonderful if the person who was at the top was actually there in order to serve and lift up those who are around them? Wouldn't it be amazing if, the world, in other words, says, go around the misfortunate. They'll get in your way and stop you on your quest to rise. And Christ says, go to the misfortunate, go through the misfortunate so that you can rise with them. This is one of the foundational teachings of Catholic social teaching, for example. Catholic Church's teaching when it comes to the affairs of the world. And it's called solidarity. It means that your rise and whatever you do as a leader needs to be rooted arm in arm with your fellow human beings who might themselves not be as fortunate to have that chance and whom your rising can bless. Okay? That's the first of the errors that Green has here that we need to be really clear about. Jesus allows us to rise, but only if it's for the sake of those who can't, so that we can, by our success, bless and render successful those who need our help. We do this together.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohn.org. www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
You know, in Green's 10th law, there's a lot that's really, really profound and really good. He says that negativity can be infectious and that losing can be infectious. And therefore, stay away from those who can infect you. He'll actually say really kind of categorically here at the end of his treatment of that principle, he says, this law admits of no reversal. Its application is universal. There is nothing to be gained by associating with those who infect you with their misery. There is only power and good fortune to be obtained by associating with the fortunate. Ignore this law at your peril. That's what Robert Greene says. So God bless him, and he's looking historically at that, and he tries to make, all kinds of historical cases. It's not that what he's saying is absolutely wrong. In fact, there's much about it that's important to remember. But at the same time, you can kind of smile because as a Christian, we follow a different kind of law. And that would be that, yes, we have to practically be aware of the importance of positivity and encouragement, and that our mindset has to be rooted in hope, right? Hope for heaven, which is our ultimate success, and also hope for true love, which is our ultimate goal. Absolutely. And that therefore, yes, we have to keep away from folks who are negative towards that, or maybe sinners, right? To a degree, we have to go towards the sinners. But you see, what we're doing is he's saying in your heart, you have to keep this drive of hope and holiness, right? But then you have to remember that your mission is still focused and always focused towards helping those who are without. We have to remember that. I mean, a Christian leader is not successful unless they're Christian. So what does Christianity have to say about success? Well, it has to say that the world doesn't measure it. That's what Christianity has to say about success. And this is the second error that I think that Greene really commits, or, when you compare it with Christianity. And that's that for a Christian leader, the cross is our power. The powerlessness of Jesus on the cross is absolute. His hands are nailed against the wood. His feet are nailed against the wood. He hangs completely dependent on the wood of the cross, unable to do anything, even to the point of being unable to breathe, where then, of course, he gave forth his spirit, his breath over the earth at the moment of his death. He was powerless, and yet it's there that he reigns. So on the one hand, you got to be careful because Christianity doesn't make a mystique, therefore, of being powerless, as if that was the point, because actually that was Christ's greatest power. So power itself is not a bad thing. Power means being able to do what you want to do. Well, Christ was doing what he wanted to do. Therefore, he was very powerful, right? He was freest when his freedom was expressed in helplessness. He reigned when he was in the prison of the cross. There's a paradox here, right? There's almost a contradiction for our minds. And yet it's a very important one, because when he calls his apostles to literally reign, he says, you will be given 12 thrones over on which you will sit to reign over the 12 tribes of Israel. That's what he promises the 12 apostles for following him. So he's saying you're going to be people of success, people of power, right? But he's like, not as the world defines it, however. So he says this, then he says, follow me by picking up your cross daily, hating your life, right? Laying it down in the service of love. So in other words, there's another way to power that Christian leaders of this world need to embrace. And it's the power of the cross. It's a power that frees us from the inside first. And when you have the freedom on the inside, even if you're in situations which might preclude you from being able to do what you want, from being able to let that freedom flow, from being able to live a life of love where you express yourself because of constraints and, sometimes which are terrible, from poverty to injustice, all forms of the loss of equity in our life, right? These are not happy things. But what the Christian can say is that's not firstly the thing of most importance. Right? Now, what a powerful message that is. And it's a message that our saints have lived again and again and again. You think, for example, of the Catholic nuns, Catholic sisters, who have gone to the poorest of the poor and done amazing things for them, building hospitals and orphanages. And yet they themselves do so in the vow of obedience, literally taking a vow to obey their superior in all things. Or you think about the beautiful place in our tradition as Christians for those who are suffering, saying that your suffering is sacred to God. We're not saying it's good. We're not saying we should triumph in it, but we're saying that it's a share in the cross of Christ. And that St. Paul will say, for example, in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, that our suffering, sharing in Christ's, is for the salvation of the world. So in our powerlessness, we become powerful because Christ in his powerlessness had shown us and demonstrated us the ultimate power. That the ultimate power is over the inside and not over the outside. It's the triumph of the heart, of the soul, of the inner freedom of someone who is surrendered to the love of God and therefore can bring that love even through their suffering and through their loss. Maybe sometimes even better in suffering and loss, but can bring that love to this world. See, it's a question of goals. What is the goal of your leadership? What are you leading for? And my friends, if you're leading for yourself and you're leading in order to enhance your ego, well, you're already missing the mark of a Christian leader. And we have to be leaders. We're called to lead, many of us, in business and in society and in our families for sure. And yet we're called to lead in order to lead folks to love, to bring people to the understanding of the needs of others and seeing our lives and their lives as an act of service. That's the goal. And therefore, I don't lead for myself. I literally lead for you. And so, yes, I have power, and yes, I need to try to keep power, etc. But the real power of the Christian isn't the power of their position. The real power of the Christian is our union with Christ on the cross. A power that transforms the soul of the world, and that's at the service of the kingdom of God.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.